a lot of people don't know this, and I think maybe we just assume that they do because we were there. But what people might not realize is that we've known each other for a long time, both professionally and as friends, going way back to the early 2000s when I was in the Bush administration and you were at Fox and you became the senior White House correspondent. And I was the deputy press secretary. And we got to travel a lot around the world together. And then we've worked together at Fox since 2009. And it's been one of my greatest joys is to be your friend. And I'm really lucky that you have time to call into this podcast.
Oh, it's great to be with you. It's always great to hang out with you. And it was fun anchoring. When Bill took some time off, it was great to be with you on America's Newsroom.
Yeah. Don't tell Bill.
Okay.
A lot of people liked it. No, I'm kidding. We'll see if Bill listens. He'll give me a hard time for that. Okay, so here's the thing. We're just, 4 months from the election. And I don't think any of us could have predicted this, but on my walk over here, I was thinking about a lesson that I learned that you never run the same election as your previous one. And I think a lot of us were walking down the 2024 lane, and including the two candidates and really the two incumbents, feeling like, okay, this is just a rematch of 2020. And it's absolutely not. This race is really different, both demographically, how things have changed, the policies of the country have changed, and the consequences have changed. The individuals themselves are different in many ways. On the health side for Biden, even on the policy side for Biden, I would say he got pulled so far to the left. President Trump overcame the January 6th things for the most part with Republicans, but he gets convicted by an overzealous prosecutor in New York. But still, that means that the Biden team can call him a convicted felon. And then you had what I call BD and AD. So BD is before debate, and AD is after debate. And I'll close with this before I turn it over to you. The weekend before the debate, I had to write a speech for an event that I was doing for the Bowling Alley Proprietors of America. They just wanted a little bit of what's going on in 2024.
Inside
so I wrote
baseball.
that on the
Inside
Sunday.
bowling.
And I'm watching the debate. I usually take a lot of notes. I stopped taking notes at 9:17, put my pen down, and was like, oh, this is over. And then I had to write another speech. But every time I put my fingers to the keyboard, the story changed about every 10 minutes. And so I finally said, forget it. I'm just going to speak off the cuff. So that's what I did. And that's what I might ask you to do today, because now we're AD a few days and Biden says, I'm staying in. He's daring the Democrats to try to get him out. You had a press secretary today who I want to talk about in the second segment here, who I think was professionally insulting and condescending to Americans. And the press corps have not covered themselves in glory because apparently this was the biggest open secret in Washington that no one was covering but Fox. So where are we today?
Where are we today? We are at a place where the president is defiant, and he's clearly backed up by his wife, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden. He's listening to forces inside his inner circle who tell him that this race is essentially tied and nothing much has changed. Listen to that George Stephanopoulos interview, and you realize that the president sees a different race. He sees a BD race because AD changed a lot of things. I think we're not fully appreciating yet the fallout. Remember, it's not only the debate, but it's the days of Democrats saying he has to get out. When Joe Scarborough said, something has to change, this is untenable, he can't win, something to that effect. And now, today is saying and lambasting other media and pundits for not giving President Biden a chance. It is quite something. It's almost like whiplash. You watch some of these folks change their tune.
It's strange, too, to feel like, how does Biden still have that much juice? Because in the days after, in AD, 2 days later, you had someone inside the White House. Now, it's an anonymous source, but they didn't deny it. Someone inside the White House calls Axios and says, President Biden is only dependably engaged between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And to me, I said, I cannot believe we're having a question of, is he going to be the nominee? Is he going to be the candidate? Is he going to be the president for the next 4 years? I'm thinking, how can he be the president right now?
I think that's a really good question. And I think you saw in the briefing today frustration, real, honest frustration from reporters who, one, realize they haven't covered the story effectively up until now, but two, are smelling blood in the water. And when as you know, a press secretary says one thing and then has to walk something back or says some other fact that she left out before, it opens the door to a lot of piranha to go after that chum in the water. And that is, the answers that they're looking for. The Parkinson's expert who visits the White House, she wouldn't acknowledge that person's name, said he was seen by a neurologist. When he does the Stephanopoulos interview and he holds a pen, as we've seen him do before, he's not writing any notes. He doesn't have any pad. He's holding the pen so that he can avoid, most people believe, shaking or doing something with his hands that is indicative of the beginning of Parkinson's. I'm not saying he has it, but it is just something that has been talked about. Listen, we are at the cusp of what I think will be a story that changes 6 more times before we get to the DNC
and maybe
convention.
by this weekend when I have to write another speech. Just kidding. I don't have another speech, but I felt like, I don't know. People are asking me in the speech what's happening. I'm like, I have to go check because there must have been something that happened. It reminds me of something when you bring up the press secretary saying one thing and then having to walk it back. I don't precisely remember the issue, though I could kind of remember it, and I remember the time frame, so I could maybe be able to get there in my mind, going back to when I was in the press office, either as deputy or press secretary. But I definitely was going to be briefing that day. And in the senior staff meeting, I said, I'm going to need an answer to the following question. And it was a foreign policy related. And so I get an answer. I was like writing down, okay, so I'll do that. But I always double checked. Okay, so I have that. So, okay, fine. Then I'm walking out of senior staff meeting and somebody that I work with leaned over to me and he said, I wouldn't say that if I were you. And all my antenna went up because I thought, I don't know what he knows, but I will find out. But what I say today might not be true, 2 days from now. And I would never, ever want to put the president in a position of having to walk something back, let alone myself. But this is a reflection on him. And think about all these times. Just think about hindsight being 2020. It drives me nuts when the president would stand outside of Marine One and try to answer shouted questions like Trump did, but he doesn't have the projected voice to be able to carry that off. And so the White House would say, oh, he took questions from the press today. I mean, I am actually find myself kind of professionally insulted by the room where we used to work.
I know. And it's really amazing that they've gotten away, if you'd say getting away with it this long, without being criticized that much. I mean, had this been, through the prism of a different administration, I think there would have been a lot more press coverage about kind of the hidden president. He hadn't done a lot of interviews one-on-one.
Never done one with any of the major papers, and they don't put up a stink about it.
I know. And so, it all starts to add up, right? Now he's at a place where he's supposedly going to be out and about and very vigorous. We'll see. I mean, you have one more stumble. I don't know what happens. I think.
How do you explain to people that the polling? I mean, I have a theory, and I talked to a smart friend who told me, somebody who'd been on the podcast before, Dawn Stewart, but the polling has remained pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think there's been some shifts in some of the states that we've seen so far. Pennsylvania heading towards Trump, a few others.
And Biden has to win Pennsylvania if he's going to win the presidency.
Yeah, Wisconsin is pretty tight. It had been Biden, and now it's neck and neck or even a slight Trump lead. But you're right. I mean, largely it's not big swaths changing. And I think that they've done an effective job in the threat to democracy and also abortion. And there's a real big threat about Project 2025 and
Tell
what
people
that
about,
means.
can you describe Project 2025 for people? I've been paying attention to that for the past year or so, and I thought this is either sanctioned by the Trump campaign or not. Turns out it was not, but now the damage might be done.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's a think tank effort to envision if they could have everything they wanted, what would they do and how would they do it? And,
They even got very detailed and wrote executive orders that they would suggest the president sign on the first day.
yeah, when you start doing that in an environment where, you are not running away with it and you still need to get after independents and suburban women, and some of those things are not that popular with that crowd, that's a dangerous thing when you're talking about elections. So you saw the former president try to back away and say, that's not my deal. And others being asked about it saying, think tanks are going to think. But, it may have been generated somewhat in some coordination. We don't know.
What do you hear from, or not, or just surmise from Barack Obama sort of reluctantly getting in a little bit late and doing that big fundraiser with him here in New York and then in LA? But his top campaign people, I don't think they're speaking for Obama, but I think they are speaking with somebody familiar with his thinking. And you have somebody like a David Axelrod who ran the campaign for Obama saying, he's all but said Biden has to go or we're going to lose everything.
Yeah. And there's some other big names that are on the record saying the same thing. And one phone call to Morning Joe, and today, Karine Jean-Pierre said it wasn't scripted, but maybe not scripted, but I bet you there were a bunch of notes and maybe a whiteboard as he's on the phone. That's not going to solve everything. We obviously have asked for interviews and more impromptu things that he can do probably helps him if he does them well. But there's a chance he doesn't do them well because we've seen all of the things he's done up until now.
Do you think?
I expect, Dana, that they're going to do the shiny thing. Look over here at the shiny thing, which is, I bet they sign a Saudi deal next week or some big foreign policy announcement next week during the RNC. They'll have NATO this week where world leaders will be compelled to say how much of a leader Joe Biden is.
But on background, they're saying that 2 weeks ago in Europe, they couldn't believe how disengaged he was.
Yeah. But I bet they're going to change their tune because they're going to be under the microscope and the pressure, and they're going to be lobbied by the administration. Anyway, they're going to try to do a foreign policy set to try to say, look, he's getting the big things done, even if he mumbles on his words every now and then.